Yeah. All right. Welcome to this very exciting panel just after lunch. So I hope we can keep your attention. This panel is about mobilizing private finance for inclusive climate adaptation in Africa. And I'm very happy that we have a great panel here, which I will introduce shortly. But before I do that, I want to share a little bit about the context and what we are doing within the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development that is trying to be one of the solutions to address this issue. So it's about in 2009 at COP15 that the 100 billion was committed or pledged to address climate change in developing nations. And then when I joined the Rio Plus 20 conference in Rio, there was not only talk about billions, but trillions. So how do we move from the billions to the trillions? So, well, I'm at this conference now, 13 years after COP15, and we're still struggling to get the rich countries to commit to the 100 billion, which is a bit disappointing, right? But at the same time, the UN estimated that the global south by 2030 needs about 2 trillion every year to address climate change. So there's a huge gap. And also there's a question of what is the absorptive capacity of the usual suspects to manage that 100 billion, that if we can even get that money. So we really need to start thinking about leveraging private sector money, right? So how can we mobilize commercial finance, compounded No? Hello? Yeah, we're back. We're back in the air. So what was I saying? So we need to think about the private sector and how we can mobilize private companies, private finance to address some of these climate challenges. And the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development is a solution to that. So let me tell you a little bit what this fund is about and how we think we can actually mobilize, be a part of the billions to trillions narrative. So the Dutch Fund of Climate and Development is a very innovative partnership between two financial companies. FMO, the Dutch Entrepreneurial Development Bank, is one of our partners. Hello. Yeah. We keep switching. We have FMO. We have the climate fund managers, but we also have SNV, another NGO. The director of SNV is sitting in the room, and we have WWF. SNV is managing. FMO is managing the land use facility. Climate fund managers is managing a water facility, and SNV and WWF are really the project motors. So we are originating private sector projects. How do we do that? So we got a grant of 160 million from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. 30 million of that money is reserved for project origination to really go to countries that need private sector money investment in adaptation and mitigation, and identify these companies that have potential solutions, but also provide grants to these companies in order to convert to a final investment. What is innovative, because it's not just another blended finance instrument, the innovation is really about this origination part. So there's a big gap between great ideas and capital, and we try to pull these companies through that gap. How do we do that? On one hand, by really engaging local stakeholders, so local companies, local communities, but also companies in the global north who is buying from these southern companies. And we then try to identify what business case do they have at hand, what are the weaknesses in these business cases. Investors like Joram next to me are really challenging us and saying, okay, how can this be bankable? Yes, it's impactful. There's an impact on climate adaptation and mitigation, but how can we actually make an impact? So now we are 3 years down the implementation of DSCD. 140 million of the 160 million has been allocated, and over 680 million of private finance has been mobilized. Currently, we have contracted 40 companies that are receiving technical assistance from the origination facility, and 18 companies have been converted to the investment facilities. So that's a huge success, I would say. But of course, it's not about money, it's not about projects, it's not about companies, but it's about impact. So what impact are we aiming to reach in a couple of years with all these, 600 plus million investments? So on one hand, we aim to sequester about 4 million tons of carbon. Then we aim to have about 2 million hectares of land under sustainable management. On top of that, there will be 200,000 wetlands, hectares of wetlands being protected. We aim to work in 5 projects with indigenous communities. We aim to provide about 800,000 jobs. And on top of that, 8 million people need to benefit from all the projects that we leverage. So of course, the signatures are there, but the impact still needs to be delivered by the companies that have received the grants and the investments. So we are there, but we are still on a pathway to actually showing impact on the ground. So I'll stop there. I think now there will be a short video showing what we're doing in the DFCD. And after that, I will introduce this panel. Thank you. Well, there's subtitles, so that helps. I'm sorry, the sound is not working, so just watch the video and watch the second. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, sorry for this. There's an echo. There's an echo, huh? Yeah. All right, let's start with the panel discussion. I would like to introduce our guest. I'll start left for me. Straven, he's the Director of ESG and Impact at the FMO Development Bank. Is this the sound? How's it now? Better? No? No? Still? Huh? What shall I switch to this? Is that one? Shall I continue? All right. I'm hearing myself, so it's a bit hard. They can't. So how is the sound now? All right. Okay. I'll continue with the introducing the panel. So we have Natchalala Nkumbo, she's the CEO of WWF Zambia. And next to her, we have Mr. Tauti Chibamba. He's the General Director of the Zambia Ministry of Environment. And then we have on the screen, we have Mrs. Candice Taylor. She's the Chief Impact Officer of the New Forest Company in Uganda. Candice, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone.
No, she's not there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Candice cannot hear us, right? Okay, yes. I'll start the discussion then. Natchalala, we just saw the video on the famous Kafue Flats, a very important wetland in Zambia. Tell us a little bit more about the work that you and your partners are doing in that wetland, please.
Thank you so much, Aaron, and welcome everyone. Apologies about the technical difficulties we're having. So the Kafue Flats is a very special place, not only because my grandparents come from there, but it's a landscape that's significant in Zambia for biodiversity reasons, but also because it contributes to Zambia's economy. About 52% of Zambia's hydropower is generated from the Kafue Flats, so the water that's there actually drives power production. Half of Zambia's food supply is from the very Kafue Flats. But unfortunately, the Kafue Flats over the years has faced a number of threats, as we saw from the video. We have a number of companies, agriculture companies, power companies, and manufacturing companies, depending on the same water resource to drive their businesses. The Kafue Flats has also been impacted by climate change. So the scientists from the Copperbelt University tell us that the size of the floodplain has actually shrunk. This is a floodplain that's about 6,500 square kilometers. And historically, it was a very big wildlife area. We've lost a lot of the wildlife now. However, we're still home to Zambia's iconic Kafue leche, which is a national symbol that you find in most of our banknotes back home. It is also renowned for having fisheries, and being home to a range of freshwater species. Thirdly, it's also home to 400 different varieties of bird species. So in terms of the work that we've done with the partners over the years, so WWF works with the community. We also work with the private sector, but we also work with the public sector. So we have been conducting research in conjunction with our private sector partner and the public sector partner to monitor the levels of degradation in the Kafue Flats. And I should say that 2 years ago, Aaron had actually brought to Zambia, we hosted a group of investors that visited the Kafue Flats, who amongst them were managing assets that were over $1 million. So when we arrived there, they noticed the environmental degradation and the impacts of climate change, but we did not have any bankable projects that were lined up. So thanks to DFCD and the case that he and his colleagues made, this origination facility was set up that has brought WWF, SNB, CFM, and FMO together to proactively identify a bankable project. So within this piece of work, we've been able to turn what we notice as environmental risk and climate risk into actual proposals or projects. So within the work that we do, we have also supported what we refer to as multi-stakeholder groups that meet periodically to look at the analysis and the research that's giving information around the health of the Kafue Flats. Unfortunately, the research that we've generated is showing that the levels of water stress are actually increasing, and something drastic has to be done. And so the last 2 years of PFCD have led us to go out there in the landscape, talk to private sector partners, and they've come to us and have identified potential projects that could deliver not only commercial returns for themselves, but also could have a social and environmental impact.
Can you give an example of a project you're really proud of?
Okay, so one of the projects actually that we're very proud of is a project that is run by corporate of sugarcane outgrowers. So basically they have a relationship with the big sugar companies where they grow cane and they supply to Zambia sugar. This cooperative has been impacted by the water stress issues within the landscape. And so they have depended over the years on flooding irrigation as a form of cultivating their crop. But with the realities of climate change and water levels reducing and greater competition for the same limited resource, they are actually applied to the DFCD for consideration of support for them to change their method of irrigation from flooded irrigation to drip irrigation. So thanks to the support of FMO, they've gone through the various stages of assessment, and we're now ready to hand them over to the investment facility of FMO for them to be considered for funding so that they can bring in the technology that is needed for them to become less vulnerable to the climate impacts and also to the water stress. Once they get that investment, what will be the impact? Obviously, there will be business continuity, but the amount of water that they will use will reduce by 70%. This is according to the feasibility study that has been done. In terms of output, through these water efficient approaches, they are actually going to increase the output by an estimation of about 10% more. The good news is that the farmers who are employed by this business are actually going to be job secure, and perhaps a few more farmers are going to be employed. So this is one of the great examples that we have, because we've been working with them for 18 years to help them prepare their documents to be considered for investment. And I think within the next few weeks, they are going to receive their funding and investment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. And you hear when Nachilala starts talking about the curfew of Let's She Never Stop. So this is her baby. And this is where her office has been working for decades. And I think the new element now is to invite the private sector to start protecting that wetland and maintain the climate role it has at the moment. So thanks, Nachilala. Mr. Doughty, you from the government of Zambia, what are you doing to invite the private sector to invest in green projects? What is the enabling environment you are creating for the companies in Zambia?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Moderator. On the government side, the Zambian government is ready for external investment. The government is ready to work with the private sector. But in terms of the specifics, the things that the government has done this far, first is to create the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment. This is the ministry that carries the government vision on greening the economy and the country. So basically, it's about low carbon, resource efficiency, and also inclusiveness. But in terms of now working with the private sector, I'm saying the government is ready, because in this space, you basically need three ingredients to attract external funding. One is political commitment. And in case of our country, we have political commitment at the highest level, at the presidential level. And political commitment is basically about the rule of law, zero tolerance for corruption, the right policy framework in place. Zambia has that at the moment. And to add to that, the government has also created what is called Public-Private Dialogue Forum. This is a forum where the government and the private sector can sit down and discuss potential investment projects. But most importantly, the government is trying to de-risk the private sector investment into these greening projects. Apart from that, the government also has provided fiscal incentives in the national budget. All clean technology is zero rated in the national budget. You don't pay duty if you are going to do a nature-based project, or if you are going to do an electrical related project, electrical vehicles, solar panels, all those things are zero rated. But more than that, the government will de-risk that investment for you. So in terms of the government, I think the government side is ready to do business with the private sector.
All right.
And now is the time to come and partner with the government. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Mr. Doughty, I have a follow-up question. So is that resulting in an increase in private sector investment already, or do you need a little bit of more time for that?
At the moment, from last year, we have seen a lot of private sector interest in Zambia. Even here at COP, there are so many people that are willing to talk to the Zambian government. So at the moment, there's that appetite, but we are still calling upon many investors who are interested in Zambia to come forward and express that interest and see how you partner with government to actualize that investment.
Thanks, okay. Next to me, I have Joram Schave of FMO. Joram, DFCD was quite a strange beast to FMO when we started working with you. Can you explain a little bit how that experience has been and how it has influenced your organization?
Sure, yes. So DFCD is indeed a very innovative way of collaborating. We're actually very excited about it, and maybe that in itself is already news. We would have thought 5 years ago that a commercial fund manager, a development finance institution, and 2 civil society organizations would be working together in an investment facility. So it's really revolutionary, I think. And to me, one of the important parts is if you look at climate change, it's such a complex problem, and you can't solve complexity at a level of simplicity that doesn't meet it. So if we were to continue governments doing their own thing, DFIs doing their own thing, CSOs doing their own thing, we're just not going to get there. And this is one of the first examples of a successful investment facility where all these parties are coming together, where we've seen the investment people turn up the heat on WWF, for example, and generate, I think, a new intensity of working, and vice versa, because you also keep us sharp on the impact side of things and delivering really exciting projects that maybe otherwise we would never have financed. So I think setting an example that this is possible, I think is news in itself and is really exciting. If you look at the DFCD, it really combines a number of elements. So there's this cross-sectoral collaboration that's turning out to be very fruitful. It also includes blended finance. So we're using public money, but blending it with private money. So you can scale it up and do more because private investors feel de-risked in the structure. So we're also leveraging essentially a smaller amount of public money to ultimately generate a lot more investable projects, which I think is a fantastic thing to do. So for us, it's been a really exciting experiment that's turning out to be successful. And in fact, in our new strategy, we've now announced that we will be starting a market creation focus area, which in a way is modeled, I think, on the experiences of the DFCD. So we're going to mainstream this kind of work, definitely working through partners like WWF and SNV to work on the origination of high impact projects. So for us, it's a very successful example that we hope will be emulated also by other development finance institutions and governments.
Thank you, Joram. And for the non-African attendees, just to remind you that the DFCD is a global fund. We're working currently in more than 40 countries all over the world, so Latin America, Africa, and Asia. But this is a session specifically looking at Africa. So on the line, I have Candice Taylor. I'll introduce her again because she was not online at the start when we had some technical issues. She's the Chief Impact Officer of the Green Forest company, the NFC company in Uganda. So Candice, you have received support from the DFCD, and can you highlight a little bit how that has helped you developing your business case, and also explain a little bit to the audience what that business case was about?
Thank you, Aaron. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you from Johannesburg. The New Forest Company has a commitment to shared value. That means looking not only at projects that have a commercial center, but that have significant community and environmental impacts. So the Dutch Fund facility was very much aligned with what we wanted to do, and it allowed us to get support for a pilot concept of a carbon landscape in Uganda. Specifically, we got support from WWF in terms of their expertise for things like riparian zones, safeguarding, and we also got support with access to markets and then development of a further scalable investment case. So we have around 500 households in Uganda who have been planting trees for the last few years, but on their own, and even through the cooperatives that we helped establish, they would not be able to establish a carbon project or access the carbon markets unless we had the support of a facility such as the Dutch Fund to bring together all of the elements and work with the consultant and to go through the lengthy and quite expensive process. But I'm very happy to announce that the VCS, or Vera, which is it's more often known as, has accepted our Uganda Carbon Landscape Project for pipeline listing. It's currently under a 30-day gazettement, and then we'll have its external audit. And NFC has also been handed over to FMO as investment ready for the next stage in the process. So we're very grateful for the support that we've had over the last 2 years, and we look forward to next steps.
All right. Thanks, Candice. I'm aware that that was not audible, but I tried to summarize a little bit. So the support NFC received from the DFCD was really to set up a scheme, how to get more value of the forest that they're currently managing, how to increase the income to the smaller forest holders, and also how to access the carbon credit market. So that was some of the activities that DFCD did. While we're fixing the audio for Candice, I'm going to go back to Joram again. Joram, can you explain a little bit how an investor is looking at climate-related projects that are coming to your investment committee, how you're assessing them in terms of value, in terms of profit, and what do non-financial institutions need to be aware of when they are putting projects in front of you?
Yes, excellent question. I think we've seen quite an evolution actually in this space. In a previous life at FMO, I was actually chairman of our investment committee. And if you go even further back, I think really the primary consideration for accepting or not projects was essentially, is it financially viable, are the cash flows visible, is there repayment capacity, and that was driving most of the decision, with some more basic environmental, social, do no harm characteristics. I think over the years you've first seen a very significant increase in attention and care around environmental impacts, social impacts, governance. Are we covering all bases there? So that's become a very central part of our assessment. I think on top of that, we already had some talk around the kind of anti-money laundering corruption side. I think that's an area that's really come up as well over the past few years. So do we know our customer? Is the source of funds good? Are we sure that this money is not going to end up in terrorism finance? So that's an element that has really been added. And now we're seeing that kind of climate analysis is coming to the fore. So we're running very large projects within the banks at the moment on assessing the climate risk side. How will this project be affected by physical climate risks, flooding, temperature changes, etc.? What will be the transition risk? So what's going to happen to regulation locally in the country? What kind of changes are the government going to bring in? And how is the company going to be impacted by that? And I think layered on top of that is our impact mandate. So are we maximizing our impact? And I think that we try to also structure into the funding propositions that we have. And I think it's very core to the DHCD mandate to drive very high impact projects that maximize impact for local communities.
And can you share one or two projects that pass your investment committee?
Sure. So I think one that illustrates nicely the various things I've talked about would be Sembra Sartawi, which is a financial institution in Bolivia that really focuses on small, often female-led businesses, also linked into the agribusiness space. So you've got a financial institution, obviously that institution itself needs to be financially viable, so that would be part of the analysis. But they're actually very creative in how they finance these often female agricultural entrepreneurs, looking very much at how their cash flows vary over time, ensuring that their repayments are aligned with or even taken directly from revenues from sales. And then they've also complemented that with climate risk analysis, which is ICT enabled. And they've looked at an insurance scheme, which is actually parametric. So rather than having an individual farmer prove that there was a certain impact at their specific farm, parametric insurance says, well, we're monitoring this particular area and there's been either a flood or there's been a certain temperature. So we know that, that the farmers in this space will have had a loss. And as a result, we will pay out automatically. So I think that's a nice example of a climate that touches all of these bases very well. And I can continue with quite a few other examples, but we'll do that.
Okay, thanks, Joran. Okay, Mr. Doughty, at your introduction, you were explaining a little bit what the government of Zambia is doing to invite the private sector. On one hand, you also was mentioning transparency, anti-corruption rules, but can you dive a little bit deeper into it? So what is your government doing exactly to create an enabling environment? So think about reducing red tape, tax incentives, fiscal incentives.
Yeah, thank you very much. On the government side, yes, those are key issues that have to be sorted out. First, there has to be transparency, and transparency is a whole lot of things. Good governance, accountability, the right policy framework in place. The government is doing everything possible now to put those things in place. Where there is red tape, the government is working hard to remove that red tape. This is the reason why they have come up with this private public dialogue forum. Is to give the private sector an opportunity to identify where there are hitches, bring them to the attention of the government, and then the government is going to resolve that. Political will is very high in Zambia now. The government is willing to do business with the private sector. On the private sector part, they also have an obligation. When they are initiating an investment, it's very important to take the local communities on board. From the word go, the parameters must be clear. The rules of engagement must be clear. The benefit sharing mechanisms must be very clear so that there's this ownership of the project by the local communities from the word go. So in terms of the government side, the political will is extremely high at the moment. The institutional framework is in place. The policy framework is in place. And now is the time to do business with the government of the Republic of Zambia. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Nachilala, you just showed me your portfolio of potential projects for the DHCD. So you clearly showed that you are successful in engaging companies in Zambia. Can you shed a little bit of light on what is the gap you are filling? So what is the support that your office and DHCD is providing to companies and to financial institutions?
Thank you very much. The support that WWF and the DFCD and our partnership is supporting to the companies is that usually the companies will have good ideas in terms of some of the solutions they would like to implement in their companies. to either deliver their growth objectives or also the adaptation objectives. However, the ideas are not fully developed and are not verified, including looking at the financials as to whether they will be able to absorb those costs but still remain productive and profitable in the future. So what DFCD does is that it has created capacity within WWF, and we've been able to offer technical assistance to these companies to help them become investment ready, so that by the time they're showing up before FMO, they have all their ducks in their row, they have all the structures in the row. Luckily, the 2 years of FMO investment or the DFCD investment in Zambia, we've actually been able to develop a pipeline of projects. We have about 40 companies that have come to us asking for this help. So there is a need. And actually today we'll be sharing with you online what we're calling a deal pipeline. So we've screened about 23 projects at the Zambia level that we think are good enough for investment. And these are projects that we hand over to the investment facility with FMO and also climate change managers.
All right. And how do you find them, or how do they find you? Can you share a little bit on that matter?
So both SMV and WWF have been working in Zambia for a very long time. So we have some in-depth knowledge in terms of the different players and actors. We have put out information through public forums where we share with the private sector about the objectives of the facility, and we engage and they share with us what their needs are and where they think the opportunities are. So it has been a constant process of creating these platforms between different stakeholders, where we are not only talking about the financing opportunity, but the risk that they're trying to manage, which is a risk of water stress, which is a risk of climate.
All right, thanks. So Candice, I'm going to try one more time with you. I hope our sound engineer has managed to bump you up a little bit. Candice, from a perspective of a company, can you explain what type of support is really helpful for a company to bring your business idea to an investment phase, and what type of support you have received or are still needing?
Hi, Aaron. I'm going to speak loudly and hopefully this helps. The key things that I would say companies in East Africa might be looking for are, number one, access to patient capital. A lot of projects, especially in the tree growing type space, need 10 to 15 years before they're going to be able to generate a return. And most of the commercial banks are looking at sub 8 years before they want to start getting their money back. So patient capital is really important. Also, capital that's flexible in terms of collateral. We've been trying to get our tree growers' trees recognized as collateral. And that's a big challenge for most mainstream banks and even microfinance banks. The second thing I would say is good data, information to help companies make investment decisions. Everyone is a little risk averse at the moment. And when there's not a lot of trade data, you don't know what the market's going to look like. People are going to urge on the side of being super conservative. So the more open source data, the more data governments and any party really can put out there to say these were the volumes that moved through a country or a region last year. These are the taxes being paid. That will enable better and quicker decision making. And the third point I'd like to mention is clarity around ESG. We've noticed that the ESG requirements tend to be rising, and I get the reason for that, especially with a lot of development finance institutes. They comply with the highest levels of the IFC performance standards, and they really want to minimize the risk. So the ESG standards are rising. But then we've also noticed, on the other hand, that a lot of money that's coming into East Africa for infrastructure development, it might be coming from the World Bank, the EU, or USAID, it doesn't come with sustainability requirements or preferential procurement specifications for those companies that have gone and complied with those high ESG standards. So on the one hand, complying with high ESG standards is good, but it takes a lot more effort and adds to the cost of doing business in Africa. So if that's the case, it would be great to see that rewarded through the supply chain. And probably to put it all together, I guess, is just connecting the dots, helping companies and government. I really enjoyed what the Zambian team have been saying around facilitating the work between policy, the NGO space, and the private space, collaborating and connecting all those dots so that we can go further together.
All right. So it's quite a long story to summarize. So, and I'm not going to do that. This is recorded, and you can always watch Candice's answer back. I would, before I'm going to ask the panelists to respond to a couple of follow-up questions, I want to open the floor to you. Are there any questions, remarks, observations that the audience want to make?
Good afternoon. My name is André de Jager. I'm Managing Director of SNV, one of the proud partners of the DFCD. I would like to comment the panels of the very excellent examples and success stories we have seen so far. I would like to ask I would like to pose two challenges to our panelists, which we have encountered so far. One is, on the one hand, we say we want to have a landscape approach, which means that you have to look at the whole landscape, while we do that through, let's say, business opportunities. And like businesses have quite of a limited focus. They don't have necessarily a landscape focus. Maybe you can give an example of how that works in the Kafua flats, and what we can still do in other areas to basically improve that. And the second challenge I think we see is that we have a lot of small and medium enterprises which have very good ideas, which can really contribute to climate adaptation and climate mitigations. The ticket sizes you have, Joram, as FMO and also CFM, is we talk about 3 million and above. And we see, for instance, in much of the low development countries, that's a little bit too high. So what do you think we can do, or what we should do as a DFCD also to bring the small and medium enterprises on board of the process in DFCD? Looking forward to your answer. Right. Thank you.
So I suggest you pick up the first one, and could you pick up the second one? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think those are two very important observations and challenges. So in terms of how do we practically implement the landscape approach, we are in Kafue because over the years as WWF, we've conducted a number of researches to look at what is going on around the impact of the water situation, the increasing water insecurity. And we've had over the years a multi-stakeholder platform that has included not only private sector, but has had regulators and other players that work within this particular sort of landscape. So when we talk about the landscape approach, it's about developing a portfolio of solutions, some of which are private sector led. So within the Kafue landscape, examples of private sector led projects include the agriculture oriented one, the carbon oriented ones, but we also have public sector type projects that have to do with restoration of the national parks, that have to do with restoration of wetland functions. So for us, the landscape approach is a combination of all these interventions, of all these projects that need investment to actually have an impact on the health of the ecosystem. So I was going to also touch on the second point, but I'll let FMO speak to it. But within the Zambian scenario, maybe I can talk a little bit. So the deal book we are sharing today, which we developed together with SNV, your local office, includes what we call aggregators, right? So these are institutions or companies that have positioned themselves to be aggregating the outputs that comes from smallholder farmers, and enterprises. We think going that approach provides an opportunity of getting closer to the ticket size that the DFCD and FMO are looking for. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Firstly, thanks for actually demonstrating live the point I was making at the very beginning of the panel, that we in our partnership, because SNV is part of DFCD, keep each other sharp. And I think that's a real value of our collaboration. On the first point briefly as well, since you ventured into the second one, maybe we're learning that to do the landscape approach fully and to really explore its full potential, we have to iterate further and seek other cash flows to help with that part of the landscape approach, either public funds or potentially certain types of credits, carbon credits, biodiversity credits, other sorts of credits, so that we can finance that bit. So I think that would help to take the landscape approach to the next level. On the SMEs, yeah, it's an excellent point and a real challenge. And I think the way that so far we have tried to tackle that is by going through an intermediated approach. I mean, the Semper Sartawi example I gave earlier is an example of that, right? To set up kind of bespoke, or in this case, it was an existing financial institution, and help them essentially understand and become comfortable with the risks of these SMEs and help them take them on board. Or alternatively, set up funds. We finance the and Green Fund, for example, also with DFCD, which has a restoration mandate, also peatland restoration and tropical forest restoration, and an ability again to go just a little bit further down into the ticket sizes. I think these are some of the interventions that we can use to really push down into the smaller businesses as well.
Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, I'm Jordi Serkin from WF Bolivia. My question was, in Latin America, we've been finding that one of the issues is that we find bankable projects, but they're looking more for equity than for loans. So how do we also mobilize equity as part of what Nachalala is saying, the landscape solution? Because we haven't been able to move forward with DFCD with these projects, but they are very interesting and they are bankable. No?
Is that something?
Very brief response. So again, because that's often also at the smaller end. So one can be through the fund solution. I think another one is to innovate in the product side. So what we've experimented with, for example, are either repayable or convertible grants, which allow you to develop something that's really an equity risk at that stage. And then if it is successful, you can recoup some of the invested money. So I think these can be structures that we can experiment with to deal with the problem that you're highlighting.
Any other question? Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Samson from WWF Gabon, and I used to be SNV. So I'm glad to have Yage here. I suppose I can be a good focal point for this kind of initiative in Gabon, as I have a background from SNV, and now I'm Panda. I think this kind of project can be implemented in Central Africa or in Gabon as a country that is playing a role model in this issue of climate change. One question for you, please. By combining development with conservation, what lesson you learned from this experience you can share with us? Just 2 lessons, please. Thank you.
Have you understand? You need to repeat your question because the audio is not very clear. Can you make it short?
Okay. SNV is in this partnership, and SNV is known as development expert. WWF is known as conservation expert. Okay, so by combining development and conservation, what kind of lesson you learned from this project you can share with us?
Yeah. Now,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks. Yeah.
A quick one. So for us as WWF, we've been doing conservation for 60 plus years. And more, we believe that we need to put people at the center of conservation to drive conservation results. And then also it's very clear that without healthy ecosystems, you cannot achieve developmental impact. So we're hoping through the interaction between WWF and SNV, they're also increasing their appreciation of the importance of healthy ecosystems in terms of developing, delivering development results.
All right. All right. Unless there are other burning questions, I would like to make some concluding remarks. So what I take from this session is comes a little bit back to what Joram said at the start. Climate change, especially climate adaptation, because these very much focusing on climate adaptation, is a complex matter. And then if you want to bring the private sector into that, that's even more complex. That's a really difficult task. So you can only solve that by making smart connections between the government, between companies, between NGOs, and between investors. And after the launch of DCD, I see that globally this model is being replicated. So that's really encouraging to see, because DCD is not going to generate the trillions that we need. We are going to translate some millions to billions, right? So that's one. Then secondly, I can't emphasize more that this focus on origination is really important. There's an abundance of great ideas, there's an abundance of capital, but you need to go through that valley of death. And I think the people in this panel have shown that they are able to do that. And I really invite you to work with us, come to us, partner with us to make this enterprise even more successful. So thank you very much for coming, and have a good day.